You won't believe what I saw when I opened my bank app that morning. It started like any other dull Tuesday. The sky outside was gray. The kind of sky that makes you want to crawl back under the blanket. I was sitting at my dining table, sipping my first cup of tea, half awake and scrolling through my phone. The steam curled upward from the mug, fogging my glasses for a second before disappearing. Everything felt normal, almost boring, until I opened my banking app. Now, I usually check my balance out of habit, just a quick glance to make sure no surprise bills have drained my account. But that morning, the numbers staring back at me made me nearly choke on my tea. My eyes widened, and I blinked hard, thinking maybe I was still groggy, maybe I wasn't reading it right. Because there it was, to massive transactions. Not small charges like groceries or a food order. Not even something expensive like a new phone. No, these were the kind of numbers that make your stomach twist. One was for a brand new motorcycle worth more than 6 months of my salary. The other, a second-hand car, still costing thousands. I froze. My hands felt clammy as I clutched the phone. My first thought was pure denial. This has to be some sort of mistake. Maybe the bank glitched. Maybe someone with a similar name got their purchase tied to my account. But deep down, I already knew. I clicked into the details. The transactions weren't pending, they were approved. The payments had gone through completely, and the receipts showed the exact time of purchase, right down to the minute. My heart started pounding in my chest. How is this possible? My card is right here in my wallet. I yanked the wallet open, pulled out my credit card, and stared at it like it would give me answers. The card wasn't missing. It wasn't cloned in some obvious way I could see. It was just there, sitting quietly, while someone, somewhere, had gone on a shopping spree worth thousands under my name. That's when I noticed the worst part. The purchases weren't even scheduled to deliver to me. Both orders had addresses listed and neither belonged to me. I zoomed in on the details, my eyes darting across the screen. My brain scrambled to make sense of it. The delivery location was only a few neighborhoods away. Not far, not random, too close to be a coincidence. And in that moment, something clicked. This wasn't just some anonymous hacker sitting in another country. This wasn't some stranger on the internet. Whoever did this was close enough to know my address and close enough to use another one nearby to avoid suspicion. That realization made my skin crawl. I set my phone down on the table, but my hands were shaking so much the mug rattled. The quiet of the morning suddenly felt heavy, like the whole house was pressing down on me. My thoughts spiraled fast. What if the bank blames me? What if my credit score tanks? What if I can't prove it wasn't me? The more I thought, the more a sick feeling settled in my stomach. I had worked years to keep my finances stable, to pay things off responsibly, to keep my record clean, and in just one night, someone had turned my hard work into a nightmare. I knew I couldn't panic, not yet. I forced myself to breathe. I had to think, who could it be? My mind went back over the last few weeks like rewinding a movie. I hardly use my card in public, and I never leave it out in the open. In fact, the only times I use it are online bills, groceries, maybe the occasional food delivery. That's it. So who had access? Who even knew enough about me to pull this off? Then, like a puzzle piece snapping into place, I remembered something from the week before. My cousin had been over at my place, bringing along her friend. He was one of those overly friendly types, always smiling, always asking too many questions. At one point, while we were ordering food, he insisted on helping me because, according to him, my Wi-Fi was too slow. I remember brushing it off, laughing, and handing him my phone for a second. A second, that's all it would have taken. I replayed the memory in my head, his fingers tapping quickly, too quickly, as if he wasn't just ordering food. Maybe he had taken screenshots. Maybe he saved my details. At the time, I thought he was just being helpful. Now, it felt like the most obvious red flag in the world. My jaw clenched. The realization made me feel sick, not just because of the money, But because this wasn't some faceless scammer, this was someone who had sat in my living room, eaten my food, and smiled at me while secretly planning to rob me blind, I picked up my phone again. Scrolling through the transaction history with my thumb, the numbers glared back at me, bold and unforgiving. The motorcycle purchase alone was more than I had ever spent in a single day, and the car, that could have been my rent for an entire year. I thought about the delivery address again. I knew that street. I had passed by it dozens of times, which meant if I wanted to, I could actually go there. I could see who picked up those deliveries. But then another thought hit me, or darker one. What if they're dangerous? What if confronting them makes things worse? I shook my head. I wasn't ready for that step yet. Not without a plan. Instead, I started taking screenshots of everything, the receipts, the timestamps, the addresses, even the reference numbers. If I was going to fight this, I needed evidence. I needed to build a case before even calling the bank. And as I organized the screenshots into a folder, I kept replaying one thought over and over in my head. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I'd just brush it off or panic and cancel the card. They thought they were clever enough to walk away with a car and a bike. No consequences. But they had no idea what was coming. And that, right there, was the turning point for me. The shock was fading. The fear was cooling. What replaced it was something sharper. Determination. Because I wasn't just going to report this and hope for the best. No. If someone I knew had dared to use my card to play rich with my money, I was going to make sure they regretted it. The moment I realized someone had used my card, my brain turned into a storm. 1,000 thoughts rushed through my head all at once. I sat there at the dining table, staring at the phone screen. My tea completely forgotten. Who could it be? I whispered to myself. I wasn't the type of person to hand out my card like candy. I rarely even used it in public. Most of the time, I kept it tucked safely inside my wallet, which was practically glued to me. My pockets, my bag, my nightstand, that was as far as it went. So how in the world did someone get hold of my details? The obvious answers didn't make sense. No one had stolen my wallet. My card wasn't lost. And if this were a random hacker, why was the delivery address so close to my neighborhood? Why not across the country? Or another city altogether? No, this wasn't random. This was personal. I leaned back in my chair, trying to piece it together. My brain replayed the past few weeks like old security footage. Who had been in my house? Who had touched my phone? Who had asked questions they had no business asking? That's when the memory hit me like a brick. Just a week ago, my cousin had dropped by. As she often did, she wasn't alone. She had brought along her friend. You know the type. Overly friendly. Always smiling too wide. Talking too much. Laughing at jokes that weren't funny. He was a little too curious for my liking. But I brushed it off at the time. We had been ordering food, and for some reason, he jumped at the chance to help. My Wi-Fi was acting up slower than usual, and before I could even protest, he said, "Don't worry, I'm good with apps. Let me do it for you." It seemed harmless. I passed him my phone while I went to grab some plates. He tapped away confidently, like he had done this 1,000 times. A few minutes later, he handed the phone back. The order confirmed. Nothing seemed strange. But now, sitting here with fraudulent transactions staring me in the face, I realized exactly what had happened. In those few minutes with my phone, he had copied my details. Maybe he had taken screenshots. Maybe he had memorized the numbers. Whatever he had done, it was enough to buy himself and apparently my cousin luxuries with my money. My jaw tightened, and I felt a heat rising in my chest. Anger. Not the kind of anger where you yell and get it out of your system. No, this was the slow, burning kind. The kind that starts in your gut and spreads until every part of you is shaking. Because it wasn't just about the money. This was betrayal. These were people I had welcomed into my home. People I had trusted. People who had smiled at me while secretly planning to drain my account. And now, here I was, staring at proof of their lies. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. My body was trembling not out of fear, but out of the sheer effort of keeping myself calm. I wanted to storm over to my cousin's house that very second, slam the receipts down, and demand answers. I wanted to shout, "How dare you, how dare you take what I've worked for?" But something inside me stopped. You see, anger makes you reckless, and reckless people get outplayed. If I confronted them too soon, they'd deny everything. Worse, they might hide the evidence. They might find a way to spin the story and make me look like the fool. No, I couldn't just charge in. I had to be smarter. I had to outplay them. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them know I knew. Not yet. Instead, I was going to set a trap so perfect that when the time came, there would be no escape. I took a deep breath, forcing my shaking hands to steady. I started thinking like them. If I were bold enough to use someone else's card for a car and a bike, what would I do next? Would I stop there? Or would I get greedy? People like that rarely stop. The thrill of getting away with it feeds them, and the more they think they're safe, the sloppier they get. So I realized I didn't need to chase them. I just needed to watch, to wait. Because sooner or later, they'd slip. But the waiting didn't make me feel any less sick. My mind kept racing back to all the sacrifices I had made over the years, working extra shifts, skipping vacations, saving every spare dollar so I could build good credit. I had worked too hard for too long to let some opportunist tear it all down in a weekend shopping spree. I wasn't just angry, I was hurt. And when hurt turns into determination, there's nothing stronger. I began planning quietly. First, I saved every shred of evidence. Screenshots of the purchases, screenshots of the delivery address, even a screen recording of me scrolling through the transactions, so they couldn't claim I had faked anything. Second, I contacted the bank not to cancel, not to panic, but to inform them of what was happening. I told them I suspected fraud, but I also told them something most victims don't say. Don't stop the deliveries. If the car and the bike were still on their way, then they were like bait on a hook, waiting for the thieves to bite. And when they showed up to collect, we'd catch them red-handed. Just imagining the look on their faces gave me a twisted kind of satisfaction. But while I was planning, I also couldn't shake off one chilling thought. If they were bold enough to use my card for something as big as a car, what else had they planned? Could they open loans in my name, apply for credit cards, drain my savings? I shuddered. My identity itself could be at risk. That realization made me even more determined. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about teaching them a lesson they would never forget. So I stayed calm on the surface. When my cousin called later that week, I answered casually, pretending nothing was wrong. She laughed, joked, even mentioned wanting to hang out again soon. Her voice was light, carefree, and all I could think was, "You have no idea what's coming for you." I smiled through the call, gave short replies, played the part of the clueless relative. But inside, my mind was sharp, calculating, already moving the pieces into place. They thought they were clever. They thought they had fooled me. But the game had only just begun. And as I hung up the phone, I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, they think they outsmarted me, but I'll show them what real outsmarting looks like. The moment I pieced together what had happened, I knew I couldn't waste time. If I confronted them directly, they'd just deny everything. If I canceled the orders, they'd walk away unscathed. Maybe even try again later with more caution. No, this time I had to be smart. This time, I needed to let them believe they'd won, so I could catch them when their guard was down. So the first thing I did was pick up the phone and call my bank. When the representative answered, her voice was calm, professional, the kind of voice that usually reassures people. But my tone was sharp. I laid out every detail, my suspicions, my evidence. And then I asked her something most customers never ask. Please, Don't block the transactions. There was silence on the other end, a pause that told me she wasn't expecting that, sir. She finally said, usually in cases of fraud, we immediately freeze the account to prevent further damage. I know, I replied quickly, but if you do that, they'll realize I'm onto them. I don't want them to get away with this. I want them caught. Can you help me do that? Her tone changed instantly. Let me transfer you to our fraud investigation team. Minutes later, I was on the line with specialists, people who had heard every scam, every trick in the book. But even they admitted my request was unusual. I could practically hear the curiosity in their voices as I explained my plan. Let the deliveries go through, flag the transactions, track everything, and when the thieves came to collect their shiny new toys, we'd be there. After some back and forth, they agreed. Together, we set up alerts so I'd be notified the second any delivery status changed. They even activated GPS tracking linked to the courier systems. For the first time since discovering the fraud, I felt a flicker of hope. This wasn't just damage control anymore. This was a chess game, and I was finally making my move. The next 2 days felt like the longest of my life. Every buzz from my phone made my heart race. Every hour that passed built my anticipation higher and higher. I barely slept. Barely. Ate my entire focus locked on those deliveries. Finally, the notification came. Delivery scheduled. Motorcycle. Arriving today at 11:30 a.m. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. This was it. That morning, I drove to the delivery address listed on the order. It was a modest house not abandoned. Not suspicious on the outside, just another home on a quiet street. But I knew what was waiting behind those doors. I parked a short distance away, careful not to be seen, and waited. The minutes ticked by like hours. My hands tapped restlessly on the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to burst in right then, confront them before the bike even arrived. But I held back. Patience. That was the key. At exactly 11:28, a courier truck pulled up. My heart leapt into my throat. The back door rolled open with a clatter of metal, and there it was, the motorcycle, shiny, polished, brand new. It gleamed under the midday sun, practically glowing with stolen money. I slipped out of my car and pretended to be a random passerby, walking slowly down the sidewalk, keeping my head down, but my eyes sharp. And then it happened. The front door of the house burst open, and out ran my cousin's so-called friend. He looked like a kid on Christmas morning, his grin stretched ear to ear. His eyes wide with excitement, he rushed forward, practically bouncing on his feet as the courier wheeled the bike onto the driveway. He didn't hesitate, didn't look nervous. He acted like this was his big day, like he earned it. And that's what made my blood boil. I could feel my fists clenching at my sides. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to storm up to him, to shout, "That's mine, you stole that from me." But I didn't. I forced myself to keep walking, to stay invisible, to swallow the rage building inside me. Because this was just the first step. The real test was still ahead. The delivery was signed, the papers handed over, and just like that, the motorcycle was his. I watched from a distance as he ran his hands over the handlebars, laughing to himself, even pulling out his phone to take pictures. I turned away, biting down hard on my lip to stop myself from exploding, because there was still one more delivery left. Hours later, my phone buzzed again. Delivery scheduled. Car arriving today at 3:45 p.m. This was the big one. I returned to the same street, parking further away this time, my heart pounding as I scanned the road. Sure enough, right on schedule, a second courier vehicle pulled up, larger this time, hauling the car that had been bought with my stolen money. The back ramp lowered with a mechanical groan, and there it was, a shiny second-hand car, polished and ready to go. And then the moment of truth arrived. The front door opened again, not just the friend this time, but my cousin herself. My cousin, seeing her step out onto that driveway, smiling, laughing, helping him sign the paperwork. It hit me harder than I expected. I had suspected she might be involved, but deep down, I had still hoped I was wrong. But there she was, pen in hand, grinning like this was the best day of her life. That was the moment I knew. It wasn't just the friend. It wasn't just some outsider who had used me. My own blood was in on it. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching them. My hands trembled. My teeth clenched so hard it hurt. Betrayal burned through me hotter than the anger ever had. They weren't just thieves. They were traitors. And yet, I still didn't move. Because if I wanted to bring them down completely, I couldn't reveal myself now. Not while they still thought they were safe. So I turned, walked calmly back to my car, and whispered under my breath, "You've dug your own graves. You just don't know it yet." That night, as I sat in my room, staring at the photos and evidence I had collected, I realized something important. They thought they had outsmarted me. They thought they had beaten the system. They thought they had gotten away with a car and a bike. But what they didn't know was that every step they took, every signature they made, every picture they posted online was only tightening the noose around their own necks. The trap was set, and soon it would snap shut. I didn't storm in immediately. That would have been too easy for them. No, if I wanted this to hit the hardest, I needed patience. So I waited for 2 full days. I stayed silent, watching from the shadows as my cousin and her so-called friend paraded around town with their new toys. The bike roared down the streets like it was theirs. The car sparkled in the sunlight, parked proudly outside cafes and malls as if they had worked for it. And my cousin, she was the boldest of all. She posted pictures on social media, plastering her feed with selfies, posing on the car hood, leaning on the bike, flashing peace signs and smug smiles. Her captions made my stomach twist. The audacity. Every photo was another slap in the face. Another reminder that they weren't just thieves, they were flaunting their theft like trophies. But what they didn't know was that every post, every hashtag, every timestamp was more evidence for me. They were building my case for me, brick by brick. By the 3rd day, I had enough. I printed out everything, my bank statements, the screenshots of her posts, the receipts from the courier company. I slipped them all into a folder, neat, organized, undeniable. And then, without warning, I drove straight to their place. When I knocked on the door, I heard laughter inside. The kind of laughter that comes from people who think they've gotten away with everything. The door swung open and there they were, my cousin and her friend, both smiling wide. But the moment their eyes landed on me, holding the thick folder, their grins collapsed. The air shifted instantly. "Nice car," I said, my voice low and sharp. "But tell me, did you enjoy it on my credit card?" Silence. My cousin blinked rapidly, her face draining of color. Her friend stuttered, his lips parting, no words coming out. I stepped inside, uninvited, and placed the folder on the table. Slowly, I opened it, spreading out the papers one by one like a dealer laying down cards in a high-stakes game. Bank statements, delivery confirmations, screenshots of their smug social media posts. Every receipt, every timestamp, every photo. They went pale as the truth bled across the table in black and white print. "Why, you've got it wrong," my cousin whispered, her voice trembling. "Yeah," her friend added quickly. "This isn't what it looks like." I laughed, a cold, humorless laugh. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like. You thought you were clever, didn't you? Stealing from me, smiling in my face, acting like family while you drained me dry." Their eyes darted between each other, looking for a lifeline, a story to spin. But they were drowning fast. "Listen, we were going to pay you back," my cousin started. I slammed my hand on the table, cutting her off. "Pay me back? With what? Your hashtags, your lies? Do you even realize what you've done? This isn't a joke. This isn't a prank. This is fraud. This is theft. And it's on record." Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. But I wasn't done. Right as they scrambled to come up with excuses, There was a knock at the door. My cousin jumped, startled. Her friend frowned, confused. And then the door opened. Two men stepped inside, dressed in dark suits, crisp ties, carrying official folders and ID badges. The fraud investigators from the bank. I had arranged the meeting perfectly. My cousin and her friend froze, like deer caught in headlights. Their bravado melted instantly. This, one of the investigators said firmly, placing his badge on the table, isn't just a family matter anymore. The silence was deafening. My cousin's friend's jaw hung open, his earlier smirk gone, replaced with wide-eyed panic. He shifted in his seat, suddenly restless, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. My cousin tried to speak. Wait, this is a mistake, right? You can't be serious. The investigator cut her off. His tone was calm but sharp, the kind of voice that leaves no room for argument. The evidence is clear. These purchases were made fraudulently using a card that does not belong to you. Both of you have posted public proof of possessing the items. Denial won't work here. They looked at me, pleading with their eyes, silently begging me to stop this train wreck. But I didn't move. I just folded my arms and leaned back, watching them squirm. Do you understand? The investigator continued, that what you've done is a federal offense, credit card fraud, identity theft, thousands of dollars in damages. This isn't just a slap on the wrist. This is prison time. My cousin gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Her friend muttered something under his breath, his face glistening with sweat. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on them. You thought you could play rich with my money. You thought I wouldn't notice. But you forgot something. I always pay attention. They stammered, begged, tried to spin excuses. It wasn't like that. We didn't mean for it to go this far. We were desperate. But their words fell flat in the air, drowned out by the thick silence of guilt. The investigators began pulling out forms, paperwork, official documents. They explained how charges could be filed, how restitution would work, how serious the consequences were. And with every word, my cousin's shoulders slumped lower. Her friend's face turned pale. This wasn't just me scolding them anymore. This was real. This was official. This was their nightmare beginning. For a moment, I almost pitied them. Almost odd. But then I remembered the way my cousin had laughed on that car hood. The way her friend had grinned ear to ear when the bike arrived. The way they had paraded there. Theft like a badge of honor. No, they had chosen this, and now they had to face it. As the investigators gathered their papers, I leaned in close, my voice barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to cut. You wanted to play a game. You wanted to see how far you could go. Well, congratulations. You've just lost everything. They didn't reply. They couldn't. Their silence was louder than any denial. And as I stepped back, letting the investigators take control of the room, I realized something important. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice. And justice had finally arrived at their doorstep. What my cousin and her partner in crime didn't know was that I had gone one step further. See, revenge is satisfying, but calculated revenge, one that makes the guilty live with their actions, that's unforgettable. While the investigators questioned them, I leaned back and delivered my final card. I told the bank officials I would not press full criminal charges against my cousin if and only if she followed my instructions to the letter. The investigators raised their brows, intrigued. My cousin looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, thinking she had been granted mercy. But she had no idea what was about to come. The conditions were simple, but brutal. First, the bank immediately reversed all fraudulent payments, pulling the funds back into my account. The smile that almost crept onto my cousin's face quickly faded when the investigator explained what came next. Her personal account frozen, marked as suspicious. Her credit profile blacklisted. She would not be able to apply for loans, credit cards, or even financing for the next several years. To the average person, that might sound like an inconvenience. But to my cousin, a woman obsessed with appearances, addicted to status symbols, and desperate to project a lifestyle she couldn't afford. It was a death sentence. She had built her entire image around being flashy. Vacations she couldn't pay for, outfits she borrowed from friends without returning, constant posts about living the life. Now, with her name red-flagged, she couldn't finance a single thing, no new car, no luxury items on credit, not even a shiny phone upgrade. Her face fell as reality hit. This wasn't a temporary slap on the wrist. This was a scar that would follow her for years. As for her friend, he wasn't so lucky. Since he had been the one who initiated the fraud, filing the online purchase with my card and setting up the deliveries. He faced full legal consequences. No loopholes, no mercy. The investigators calmly explained his situation: fines, possible jail time, and a permanent mark on his record. His jaw tightened, his hands trembled, and for the first time that day, the cocky grin he once carried disappeared completely. I stood there silently as the investigators cuffed him. His head was lowered, his dreams of playing rich crushed in an instant. He looked at me, eyes burning with anger, but also something else: regret. He knew this wasn't just the end of a scheme. This was the end of the image he had tried so hard to build. My cousin, on the other hand, broke down. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, begging me for forgiveness. Her words came out in a flood. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was just a mistake. Please, please don't ruin my life. We're family. You can't do this to me." Her sobs echoed in the room, her voice trembling with desperation. But I didn't soften. I didn't reach out to comfort her, because I had seen her smiling proudly on that stolen car. I had watched her laugh as if nothing mattered. I had witnessed her boast about her new life, fully knowing she had built it on my back. I looked her dead in the eye and said words she will never forget. A mistake is ordering the wrong meal. Stealing thousands from family is a choice, and choices have consequences. Her cries grew louder, but I didn't flinch. In the days that followed, the fallout was brutal. The car and bike were both repossessed almost immediately. The delivery company picked them up, and her neighbors watched from their windows as the flashy lifestyle she had bragged about crumbled before their eyes. Whispers spread through the neighborhood. People who had liked her social media posts now mocked her behind closed doors. Her once constant updates stopped. No more selfies with cars she didn't own. No more hashtags pretending to be wealthy. Her account went silent, the silence louder than any of her captions. At family gatherings, she couldn't look me in the eye. She avoided me like the plague. Her pride shattered. She had wanted to humiliate me by using me. But instead, she had humiliated herself. Her friend, he disappeared entirely. Word spread quickly that he had been charged officially. And though I didn't follow every detail, I knew his life would never be the same. He had gambled with my card, and he had lost everything. As for me, I walked away with my finances safe, my record clean, and my dignity intact. But more than that, I walked away with a story that still shocks every person I tell, because most people expect a thief to face immediate jail. But this was worse. My cousin had to live in the shadow of her own mistakes, branded by the choices she made, constantly reminded that she couldn't escape them, and that, to me, was a punishment far heavier than prison bars. I'll never forget the last thing I told her before I left that day. "You thought you were smart, playing with my money. You thought you'd won. But here's the truth: you never stood a chance. Because no matter how far you ride on someone else's credit, the road always runs out." Her eyes filled with fresh tears, but I turned and walked away. And as the investigators closed their files and the car outside rumbled with repossession trucks, I realized one thing: sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens or handcuffs. Sometimes it comes with silence, with humiliation, with a weight of choices crushing down. So, the next time someone thinks of using your card without permission, remember this: they might get a ride for a while, they might post, brag, and smile. But what they'll never see coming is the moment it all comes crashing down. And when that moment arrives, it hits harder than they could ever imagine, because sooner or later, the debt always gets paid.